Hello, everybody. Welcome into Cover 4 Live, presented by Georgia Farm Bureau. My name is Brandon Adams. Happy to have the entire Dog Nation team with us here tonight. Michael Griffith. I don't know why I'm going so formal with the first names there. Jeffrey Sintel and Kevin Connor Riley. Good to have everybody here. I have to say, I feel like I'm same thing every single week. I'm jealous. Somehow my house looks like a crypt. I don't understand why it looks so dark. Like Mike, completely bright. I even got a studio light over here that I've, brought in to kind of pump in some artificial light. Yet I still feel like I'm, broadcasting from the seventh circle of hell. Like, why is it that y'all look so much brighter than I do? Or is that a figment of my imagination? Do I look dark to y'all?
It's the shadows. I mean, Jeff has the natural sun behind him, and I just have a lamp right in front of my face. Otherwise, I'd be as dark as you are.
I mean, this is like the brightest part of my house. I mean, I didn't realize I lived in such a medieval castle. But nonetheless, we got a lot of stuff to do. Let's just go ahead and get into it right now. Cover 4 Live, it's presented by Georgia Farm Bureau, and it's good to have all of you with us. Brand new time for us, 7:30 p.m., and this will be the time here going forward. One of the things, we don't have fancy market research around here. We don't have focus groups, but we have done enough anecdotal evidence to know that some of you like broadcast in the evening time. Great success. Some of the things that Mike Griffith has done in the evening. Jeff Sintel, brand new time for his program covering recruiting each and every Wednesday night. Connor Riley, much the same way. Me, for the most part, I don't like working at night, but everybody else really knocking out of the park with some nighttime broadcasts. So Cover 4 Live, presented by Georgia Farm Bureau, at a brand new time here after dinner, getting settled in, prime time, if you will. And by the way, second screen experience tonight as many of you get ready to watch some college football with UAB in Miami, NFL season kickoff with the Kansas City Chiefs and the Houston Texans. So thanks for making us a part of that with all of you. Jeff Sintel, before our broadcast began, brought up a very interesting topic, and it's going to lead us off tonight here on Cover 4 Live, presented by Georgia Farm Bureau. The idea that this Georgia defense, with all the accolades it's received, statistical accomplishments for a year ago, might be the best so far of the Kirby Smart era, even better than the unit in 2017 that obviously led Georgia to an SEC championship and ultimately into a berth in the college football playoff. Mike, you've been around the SEC for a long time. You weren't in Georgia in 2017, but you certainly saw it plenty. Where do you think this defense ranks among, on paper anyway, obviously the season hasn't started yet, where do you think this defense ranks among the ones that Kirby has had thus far? And in recent SEC history, once again, based on what we know about this unit on paper.
It's the best I've seen in my years as a beat guy on a team I've covered, whether it was Alabama or Auburn or even 98 Tennessee, 2017. On paper, now you said it, BA. I mean, these guys, if they can play up to some of the level they play. I mean, remember last year, this team led the nation in scoring defense and run defense, and number 3 in total defense, and number 8 in pass efficiency defense, even with that tough night that they had against Louisiana State when the offense rolled over and played dead, didn't help them out at all, turned the ball over. I mean, these guys are so good. The difference is the front. When I look at this defensive front, I see waves, 1, 2, 3. And I'm not sure who's better between Trayvon Walker and Malik Herring. Jalen Carter is a guy that excites me. I like Jordan Davis, but I can't wait to see his backups. Julian Rochester has 18 or 19 career starts. He's a fifth-year senior. I'm not even sure he can get on the field. Nolan Smith and Jermaine Johnson, number 1 recruit in the nation, number 1 JUCO player. They're second and third stringers behind Azeez Ojulari. Don't forget about Adam Anderson. He was a top 50. I mean, it is one after another. And if Nakobe Dean is the X factor that I believe he'll be, BA, these in the secondary, I mean, they got 3 starting NFL cornerbacks for 2 jobs. And just when you think, J.R. Reed leaves, I'm not sure Lewis Sane isn't better. And he's put on 15 pounds. So, and Richie Lecount may be the most instinctual. I guess you can see where I'm going here.
Sure thing. Jeff, what do you think about it?
So we had a good discussion on the Dog Nation forum. We were kind of breaking down some really astute forum members. Here's how they quickly rolled through. I think this is a question of, first you got to answer this. Is this Kirby Smart's best Georgia defense? Let's look at 2017 real fast. 2017 had a good offensive line, incredible linebackers highlighted by an amazing linebacker, and maybe even average to below average defensive backs.
Yeah.
2018, you've got a very decent defensive line. You've got a very decent linebacker core. 2019, you have very okay, maybe a little bit better defensive backs. Last year, Last year, I thought it was kind of very good defensive line play, very good linebacker play, and excellent DB play. You look at 2020 right now, and to say it in a couple smaller terms, I think the defensive line, Georgia, is going to be very good to excellent. The linebacker is going to be very good to excellent. And this is going to be upper crust, upper tier excellent Georgia has ever had in terms of the defensive backs. Now, I think this year does answer the question for me is the best ever Kirby defense, but the best ever defense that Kirby has ever coached, period. You have to go back to those days in T-Town. And I remember everybody wants to think about 2012 and Chris Conley and Aaron Murray and what could have been. Folks, you got to remember that defense, Alabama that day had 3 number 1 picks on the defense that year. They had Marcel Darius, on and on and on. They had Mark Barron, Dre Kirkpatrick, Dante Hightower. Those guys like that were all on that field. Mike Griffith just rolled off a lot of names, and he sounded like Jerry Maguire in doing so in trying to state their cases. But there are not 4 first-round picks on this Georgia defense.
Wow.
Sir. Yeah, I think that's really – Mike, you disagree?
I'm not ready to say that. When you say 4, maybe not in the next draft, Jeff, but I think together, all the guys, I think if we were going to look at these guys right now on the roster, I would make a bet with you that there will be 4 first-round picks that are on the roster, not in the next draft, but before. Jalen Carter is going to be a first-round pick, Jeff. He's going to be a first-round pick.
Before he's ever
played. Yeah, but if we extended that thing out to the 2012 Alabama defense, bro, there might be 7 first-rounders on that pick because you got to remember C.J. Mosley was coming later, D. Milner was coming later. That 2022 Alabama defense was loaded.
I didn't make that case. I made the case of the teams I didn't cover. I wasn't a beat guy. I covered 93, 11-0 Auburn, 98, undefeated Tennessee. I covered a Michigan State team that went to the Rose Bowl and ranked in the top 4 top 10 in all 4 categories. I say this is the best Kirby defense we've seen at Georgia. And remember at Alabama, too, let's not forget, they had an offense that played to that defense. Those guys were, Greg McElroy, they weren't running, shooting, playing 90 to 100 snaps a game. They were at a snail's pace at times, 72, 74 snaps.
Connor, who do you project as a potential first-round pick in either of the next couple of drafts on this defense? And I'm not asking you to be Daniel Jeremiah. Just, best guess type scenario here. Who could you conceivably see putting that kind of thing together? Because as it stands right now, there's no obvious first-round pick on the defense of this upcoming draft. So you're really making some pretty significant projections to even look 2 drafts ahead.
Trayvon Walker, he's a guy that I like. He's long, he's big, he's athletic,
nice.
He's 6'5", and can play down there on kickoff, can really run. He needs to work a little bit on his pass rush there, but I think him and Jordan Davis are the 2 guys that really stand out. I can't give you numbers as far as how good this defense is. Yes, on paper, I am with Mike. This is the best defense I think Kirby has had. I'm a little disappointed he didn't name Mark Webb and Tyreek Stevenson to just complete the entire defense there. As far as recent defenses that were the most dominant, the 2 that come to mind are the 2011 LSU defense and the 2016 Alabama defense, the defense where Kirby was not the defensive coordinator, but that was Jeremy Pruitt's first year as the DC there with Jonathan Allen, Damon Payne or Deron Payne, just loaded front to back there. Ryan Anderson, Tim Williams off the edge. And what that 2011 LSU defense that had Tyrann Mathieu, Patrick Peterson, what those 2 defenses had in common is as great as they were, and those teams, in my opinion, both that year were the best teams in college football, in large part because of their defenses. Neither of those teams won the national title that year. 2011 LSU lost to Alabama, who Alabama was probably the better team, but I think LSU had the better defense between the 2. And then in 2016, Deshaun Watson just happened to run enough plays to where that Alabama defense wore down in the 4th quarter, and they made a play there at the end to win it. So I think that's something very interesting to sort of keep in mind with all this. With no matter how great that defense might be, and as we've continually said all season long, all off season long, eventually your offense is going to have to make enough plays, especially in today's age, to win a national title.
Let me ask you. Go ahead, Jeff.
See, Brandon, that's where that dual threat quarterback got in everybody's head, including the ball coach Kirby Smart. That Alabama team had all the bells and whistles. They had all the toys, all the backers, all the 3 techs, all the 5 techs, all the edge guys, all the DBs, all the first rounders. And then a monster quarterback lead like Deshaun Watson just lit him up. Do you remember those pictures that were coming out of those bowl games when Kirby and that team kind of held on for a national title, and they were like, oh my goodness, what was that? Were they giving up 40 points to those Clemson teams or whatever? It goes to show you that no matter what you have, no matter how strong you build that defense, a dual threat quarterback can really get it done.
Let me ask you guys a question, and you may disagree, and that's why I'm asking. If you look at the last 3 years at Georgia, when Kirby's really had it cooking, don't even count 2016 here in this, I would say that in 2017, even though that team was among the stingiest defense in the country from a scoring standpoint, not only did they not have a great secondary, I don't even think they had a good secondary. That was, I would say, average to below average secondary, with all due respect to the guys who are playing there. And is that too strong? And maybe it is.
That was not a below average secondary.
It was average.
Okay. But I don't know that it was much above average. I mean, that was an exploitable secondary, and I say that with all due respect.
The reason Oklahoma put up so many points on them wasn't because of the secondaries, because they couldn't stop Rodney Anderson.
I don't want to relitigate the past, but go watch the first half against Missouri that year. There were a lot of other teams besides Baker Mayfield putting up passing yards against that secondary. But the point is, secondary was not great in 2017. I would say defensive line was not great in 2018. You can debate in 2019 whether the linebacking core played great. I think it was at least very good, maybe great, maybe not quite great. The point I'm getting to here is when you look at Kirby at Georgia, the 3 units of the defense, I don't know that he's ever had a defense where all 3 units played great in the same year. Maybe coming close to that a year ago with the 3 units, but I think one of the things that would be interesting to see in this 2019 defense is, can you be great in the secondary? It seems like they probably should. Enough linebacking talent to be great to linebacking core. Enough collection, as Mike pointed out, interesting defensive linemen. Jordan Davis, Trayvon Walker, Jalen Carter. These are very interesting players, to say nothing of the veterans, guys like Malik Herring who've been here for a while. This, to me, seems like Kirby's best chance at Georgia to be great at all 3 levels, something I would argue that they haven't done in the same season yet.
That's a great point, Brandon. To be good at all 3, to be great at all 3 levels, and I think you broke it down really well. You know, I remember talking with Mel Tucker out there before that Alabama-Clemson national championship game in California, and he was explaining that early on they really weren't able to do everything that Kirby wanted to do with the defense. It takes time to build a culture. It takes time to build a personality, and I think what you're going to see is a culmination of these years of experience. These are now players that have been brought in, that have learned the Kirby Smart system. They're going to be able to do more things. What did he used to call him? Rat Trap Richie, I think he used to call Richard Lecount, because sometimes Richard would give up his assignment and try and make plays. Well, now Richie can play the assignment and still make the play. That's why he was a part of 6 turnovers in the last 6 games. When you've got a playmaking safety like that, and I can't overstate this, or maybe understate. I always forget how to use that word, but I can't say it strongly enough. Richard Lecount is a difference maker in this secondary. That is something in my mind that's been missing. When I look at these good Georgia defenses, they're very sound. There's a lot of gap integrity. People don't get out of their gaps. They don't give up the big play. You know, I've harped on that. No plays over 40 yards the last 6 games. But I haven't seen that guy flashing out there making those picks and making those plays and taking it back 6 points the other way and changing the momentum. That has been missing. And I think that is what Richard Lecount can do in this secondary. And I think when you have a good front 7 that can beat the blocking one-on-one, doesn't need to blitz to get pressure, that's going to open the door for guys like Nakobe Dean, Tyreek Stevenson, Lewis Seen, Richard Lecount, to your point, Brandon. So I think you broke that down really well. I would agree, all 3 levels, Georgia is stout.
Connor, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a great point on Richard, especially with the 4 interceptions. He played his best game, in my opinion, of his career against Baylor. And I'll be interested to see how much of that and what they did against Baylor translates and goes into this year. I think they were a little bit more aggressive than they had been in the past in terms of trying to force plays, trying to force pressure, trying to force turnovers. I think that's something that we'd all like to see this Georgia defense do a little bit more this year, sort of up the sack totals, up the turnover totals. Because if you're doing that, not only is it sort of making this defense stand out a little bit more, it's also, I believe, benefiting your offense by setting it up with better field position.
I think that's true. Jeff, let me finish with this on this topic, just to play devil's advocate for a moment, because I think we all expect the Georgia defense to be very good this year. Thinking as a fan for a moment, what would be my concern for why it might not come together? I think Connor's right. They got to produce more sacks, but we've talked about that before. The other thing that would come to mind for me is I don't think this group is impervious to injury at a couple spots. Mike mentioned one of them. I think there are 4 guys that if they were to miss some significant time, it might be hard for Georgia to replace. One of those is Richard Lecount, who Mike mentioned. I'm going to mention the other safety Lewis seen there as well, because while I'm assuming that you may cross-train a Tyreek Stevenson or you get a Chris Smith involved, what Georgia has behind those guys at safety is, to me, a lot less certain than what they have behind those guys at cornerback, where I do think Georgia's really deep right now. So the two safeties, I think if either one of them were to get injured, it might be tough to be great. I think Monty Rice is one of those guys. We're only a couple years removed from Georgia not being great against the run. I think that Monty Rice is Georgia's best run-stopping linebacker. Don't like the idea of playing significant snaps if he were to go down. And my fourth guy is Jordan Davis, in terms of just being very difficult to replace what he does, the interior of the defense. If I'm thinking about reasons, Jeff, why maybe it doesn't happen for Georgia, you can't completely mitigate against injuries. It's those four, Davis, Rice, the two safeties, that for me would make me a little nervous about this group being able to replace them. The other spots I think are deep enough, stout enough that you could potentially suffer an injury there and actually not skip a beat.
Well, Brendan, I think as Michael pointed out and Kevin Connor commented on afterward, I think depth is always an issue, but I wonder, for me, I'm going to try to summon up my best Coach Boone voice when I talk about irreplaceables. I don't think this Georgia defense can replace Jordan Davis, cannot replace a Richard Lecount without significant drop-off. I do agree with you, Brandon, that the safety position gets a little thin once you get past Scene and Lecount, then you're cross-training and getting new guys on the field. The thing that concerns me about this defense, and this would be the December football game concerns, is we saw last year, if the other team has a top 15 receiver, it's going to be hard for Georgia to cover that guy, especially if they have two top 15 first-round receivers. I mean, it's great that Georgia's got so many cornerbacks, but we're not talking about a surefire top 15 first-round cornerback anywhere. And I also you start thinking about how this team would have matched up with spying a guy like a Justin Fields or a Trevor Lawrence. I think if you naturally want to say Nakobe Dean or you naturally want to say Adam Anderson, I think those are very good places to start. Those are great places to start. I think this team gets really salty, Brandon, if the pass rush happens. And I mean, you get a little bit more out of Jalen Carter, you get a little bit more out of Trayvon Walker, and then maybe you get Jordan Davis consistently collapsing the pocket. Because then all of a sudden, if Georgia does have to go to a Justin Kimber, a Jalen Kimber on outside, or you have to go really deep down the depth chart, you're helping that other side of the team out. Brandon, this is the first time that I can say in Georgia football under Kirby Smart where there hasn't been an area Kirby had to hide. He had to hide his DBs in 2017. He had to hide his front in 2018. Last year, I thought he didn't have the great push up front. I think he was good, but not great on the D line. I think he was good, but not very good at linebacker. Dinging them a little bit there for the pass rush. I think that's the area where Georgia gets a little bit more pressure on the quarterback. Maybe they can because they can dial up more points now. But I think it will make that back end look like a couple more All-American players if quarterbacks are having to unleash that thing a lot sooner.
Totally agree with you. If Georgia finds a pass rush to go along with everything else it has, they're going to make somebody quit football this year. The game's just going to be too unfun.
And someone's going to opt out.
Yeah,
Vanderbilt.
They're going to make somebody opt out if they had the pass rush to go with everything else this defense does. It's Cover 4 Live, presented by Georgia Farm Bureau. I'm Brandon Adams, Mike Griffith, Jeff Sintel, Connor Riley on hand as well. And most importantly, we're glad to have you with us too as part of our brand new time, 7:30 p.m. This is our new time for the rest of the season. So please make sure you tell your friends that we're talking Georgia football here on a Thursday night, all made possible by our friends at Georgia Farm Bureau. There's a Georgia Farm Bureau office literally in almost every community, town, all throughout the state of Georgia, in communities just like the one that you live in. Those agents live there, they work there, they play there, they build their lives there. They support the community in those areas, just doing great work, whether it be supporting the local agricultural programs or helping people save money on their home, their auto, their life insurance. That's what Georgia Farm Bureau is all about. You can find out for yourself, and you check them out on the web at gfbinsurance.com. gfbinsurance.com. That'll get you in touch with Georgia Farm Bureau. And when you connect with them, you'll find out what so many people have always learned, that Georgia Farm Bureau is always the home team. It's good to have Georgia Farm Bureau with us. Good to have all of you with us as well. Let's shift gears here now on Cover 4 Live, presented by Georgia Farm Bureau, and talk a little bit about what's left for Georgia at quarterback now that Jamie Newman is opted out. And obviously, we can talk about JT Daniels, and I'm sure we will. We've done that before. Juan Mathis, Carson Beck, Stetson Bennett very much the same way. But I think one of the things that's also interesting here is in the aftermath of Newman's decision to leave, you've seen some people kind of downgrade their opinion of Georgia. I know Mike Griffith has written about what Kirk Herbstreit said on College Game Day last week. You can think about your own version of the talking head, either online or on TV, where some people have kind of downgraded their expectations for Georgia now that Jamie Newman is not here anymore. So I don't know. We can take this however you want to. What your expectation was for Georgia prior to this, how much less, if at all, is it now that Newman is not here? Jeff, let me start with you on that. How much do you downgrade Georgia in your mind now that Newman, who at one point was the presumed starter, is no longer here?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. I think I start probing the layers of what I think here by asking myself a question. Is Georgia now closer to being a 7-3 team than they are to being a 10-0 team? That's the part that goes through my head. And you guys are going to go, how in the world does this defense lose 3 games against that schedule? I think for me, it takes, I don't know if I'm not the gambler and the entertainment wagerer like some others on this feed here, but whatever your win expectation percentage is, I think those 2 games that are on everybody's schedule, they look a lot more daunting. And then what happens if Georgia gets into a South Carolina scenario, or Georgia gets into a scenario like they have with South Carolina against an Auburn of a year ago, or against a South Carolina or another school as well in there? I think that's where you start wondering if this team's median is now somewhere between 7-3 is the low and 9-1 is the high. I mean, everybody wondered about that Alabama game, and then also that Florida game is kind of landmines in the schedule. I think most people do feel that Jamie Newman would have won the job, at least at the outset, and he would have been veteran. He would have been run game. He would have been at least been in the battles. I am curious, though, that, maybe this Newman departure maybe accelerates the chance to see what Dwan Mathis can do a little bit. I think he could bring some of those same things to the table that everybody liked. So for me, I think this sounds elementary and it feels kind of foolish and haphazard to say it, but I think the chances of Georgia going 8-2 this year are now higher than Georgia going 10-0.
Connor, what do you think?
Yeah, I think Jeff really hit on it there, and he used 7-3 and 10-0. I'd say it's looking more perhaps like an 8-2 team now instead of a 10-0 team. I still officially, I'm going to say they're going to go 9-1, but I feel if it's an over under and it's 8.5 and it's plus money to take the under, being a wise gambler that I am, I might be inclined to take the under there. I think with Newman leaving, with all the hype he's gotten all this offseason, with all that we've heard, with all that we know about him, well, yes, he hadn't always played great against the elite Power 5 competition. He still had elite strong games in there, games that were better than anything I think JT Daniels had done at USC. So while I don't necessarily know if the floor is lower for this Georgia team this year, I think the overall ceiling is a little bit lower for me. Now, that doesn't mean that Georgia still can't go out, JT Daniels or Dwan Mathis, whoever it is, and go out and accomplish some of the goals there. But I think without Newman now, there's a little bit less, as Jeff sort of hit on, a little bit less margin for error, especially in some of those Alabama and Florida games.
Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's more of a boom or bust year. I think it's a higher ceiling, lower floor, because now you're going to play air raid. If Jamie Newman had won the job, and I don't think he would have, I think you would have seen more RPOs. I think you would have seen a team that would have relied on the quarterback a little bit more, that shooting guard mentality instead of that point guard mentality. If you get a trigger back there that can get the ball and spread the ball around to 4 or 5 different targets, and those targets prove worthy. That's the other half of this. We're sitting here talking about the quarterbacks. But yeah, I told you earlier, my biggest concern is the receivers and who's going to catch the ball in the pass game.
Sure.
Will Trey McKitty get back? Will James Cook, fulfill his potential? Is that single back guy that we see do so much in the NFL in these types of offenses? The Clyde Edwards-Helaire that I have on 2 fantasy football teams going tonight. Can he be that kind of guy? Are we going to see George Pickens control his emotions and not get thrown out of any games or any costly 15-yard penalties? Can Jermaine Burton be everything that Jeff Sentell has built him up to be? That's quite a lot. Jeff's talked a lot about this guy. So did Terrence Edwards, by the way, and he trains them. Can Marcus Roseme? He's got a new name now, BA. Are you able to say that name yet, by the way?
Yeah, Marcus Roseme. Remind me what his new name is?
No, he's not. Marcus Roseme.
Say it again, Connor.
Marcus Roseme, Jack Saint.
Yeah, and I certainly want to honor that. We want to call people by their chosen name. So we'll certainly honor him on that. Although for someone like me, that's going to take some practice to get used to, because I've been saying Marcus Rosemary now for a while.
Yeah, can MRJ come through for the Bulls? Can MRJ come through? There's a lot of questions to be answered. But if you check all those boxes, this is going to be a really difficult Georgia offense to defend, because one of the biggest questions that needed to be answered was the offensive line. And I really like what little I saw and what I've heard from this offensive line. I think Matt Luke's done an unbelievable job. I think the recruiting is really kicking in. These preseason ranks that had Georgia's offensive line ranked 4th in the SEC, LOL. Maybe Alabama's better, but Tennessee's and Kentucky's won't be. So you've got the offensive line, and if you can keep JT Daniels healthy, he's that trigger. He's the guy that can fly the jet, that can get through the progressions. Now, the downside of not having Jamie Newman, if you lose your starter, which, by the way, I've said this stat a million times, only 4 out of 14 teams started the same quarterback every game in the SEC. Now, all of a sudden, you don't have that second guy that you go, oh, yeah, he's been there and done it. You're looking at Dwan to come in there, or you're looking at Carson Beck. Jeff, I'm not ruling out Carson Beck yet, by the way, but that's a pretty mighty fall. When you go from a guy, a veteran like a JT Daniels, to a guy that's never played a college game, that's going to be tough. And I think that's why you're going to see Georgia playing 3 quarterbacks in that opener.
Okay, let me make 2 quick points here. The first one is this. Somebody a moment ago casually threw out the notion of 7-3. I cannot say this strongly enough. Georgia cannot go 7-3 this year.
Jeff threw out 7-3. Put your name on it.
Yeah, Jeff
Put his name on it.
Georgia cannot go 7-3. This year counts, y'all. This is not a NCAA 14 thing where you can just hit the reset button 3/4 of the way through. This counts on everybody's resume. I have gone on the record as saying it. National champion gets to put the trophy in their case. SEC champion certainly does. What happens this year builds on future years. It's not a free pass year. It's the same thing for like the NBA fans who want to debate LeBron James' legacy. They all decided before this thing begins, the bubble counts. What happens in the bubble goes on your Wikipedia page. Whatever happens in this particular year, it counts on your full-time resume. So Georgia doesn't get a free pass. If Georgia plays a game with 54 players because everybody else is quarantined, you still got to win it. This is a no excuses year for Georgia. So one less quarterback, I think makes things a little harder, but you can't go 7-3. You can go 9-1. Honestly, I think there's a chance the SEC champion actually finishes 8-2. I mean, I don't know that anybody's going 10-0, but you can't go 7-3.
See, and I feel like this is a Charlie Brown Great Pumpkin episode, or maybe the Thanksgiving special, where I go like, I'm the teacher that goes wah 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 wah, and then all of a sudden I said 7-3, and Brendan starts wanting to throw lamps in the side of his house against the wall. SEC schedule, gentlemen, and what I said, I know we've got 2 reporters in the room. As I said, Georgia is now closer to 7-3 than they are to 10-0. Oh, Brendan just heard that and he wanted to slap somebody. Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. And then you got that SEC schedule as well. Think about this, Brandon. JT Daniels not cleared to play for game 1. Not cleared to play for game 1. Georgia rolls out there with just Dwan Mathis, Carson Beck, and Stetson Bennett on the bus. Ooh, all of a sudden, what happens if a football play happens with Dwan Mathis? He gets a ding, he gets a shoulder, he has to miss part of that game. Now, all of a sudden, you're 2 quarterbacks where you used to have a plethora of quarterbacks. And don't knock this, guys. This is SEC football. It will be a physical grind, meat grinder every week. What if Georgia's faced with just 2 quarterbacks on the bus, 2 quarterbacks in a game rotation, rather than the 5 everybody thought they might have?
Yeah, if Georgia can't beat Arkansas with Stetson Bennett at quarterback, then Georgia's not winning anything this year anyway. Arkansas has won one SEC game since 2017.
Yeah,
every bit as bad as Arkansas. I know we love Sam Pittman, but Stetson Bennett could start for Georgia if they would find a way to beat Arkansas.
Jeff, what about Auburn the next week, sir?
That's a little bit tougher.
That's a losable game.
My point was Arkansas.
So
my
Jeff,
point was Arkansas.
And Mike, I want to hear from you on this too. But Jeff, let me ask you, since you brought it up. What I'm getting at is, I think there is a chasm in between 8-2 and 7-3. 7-3, 6-4 don't necessarily feel all that different to me. I think we're going to see a good bit of 6-4 in the SEC this year. I think you're going to see some gravitational pull towards the middle. But there's a chasm between 8-2 and 7-3. If Georgia went 8-2, there's a circumstance by which I could see myself saying, hey, you did your job this year. 8-2 may win the East, for instance. I'm not that afraid of 8-2 against SEC only schedule. 7-3, I just think there's a big drop off between 8-2 and 7-3. Would you at least acknowledge that?
Oh, certainly. But again, the point, I'm going to double down on the point. The point was, I think this team is closer now to 7-3 than 10-0. And I think, and again, I'm not saying, oh my gosh, Jeff's saying they're going to go 7-3.
I understand.
Folks, I even clarified that statement whether you guys are going, what, with this defense, how can this team lose 3 games? I get it. I hear you. I get it. I hear you. But in this all SEC schedule, you take one of those quarterbacks out because, hey, SEC football is a physical game. And then all of a sudden, what did somebody say earlier? The margin for error gets a lot thinner right there with Georgia football going forward. And I agree with whoever threw out the point. I think it was echoed by another gentleman on the feed as well, is I would say the likelihood of a 10-0 SEC champion, or I guess an 11-0 SEC champion after the conference title game, I think that is highly unlikely.
Mike, before I get you, let me read something from Noah Sheldon on Facebook, who said, what's everybody smoking? You're talking about this 7-3, 8-2 stuff. Here's just the one thing I want to put out there and make sure that we all understand. And then, Mike, I want to give you a chance to take this conversation wherever you want to go. If you look at the last 3 years in the SEC, there's only been one team in each season that lost, only one game against SEC foes. Everybody else lost at least twice to SEC foes. And I'm counting teams like Georgia who had to play a 9th game going into the SEC championship here. But in the last 3 years, 13 of the 14 teams in the SEC lost at least twice to SEC teams, and that's with 8 or 9 game schedules. I think for all of us, we've just got to get used to a very different kind of thing when it's 10 games SEC only. I mean, we've seen 9 and 7 teams win the Super Bowl before. When you're playing even competition, the notion of going undefeated kind of goes out the window. So for the Georgia fan who really believes in his team, the team may be as good as you think it is. 8-2 may just end up feeling like a really good record when you're having to strap it up week after week after week against, there ain't no Louisiana Monroe to take a breather against, Mike.
Yeah, Jeff, I can't see 7-3. Your point's right though, BA. It's a front-loaded schedule. That's no 7-3, Jeff. It's a front-loaded schedule to begin with. So if you're a little bit off, you can be a lot off quickly. And then by November, if you're out of the race in the East, you wonder, do guys start opting out? And you hate to even think about that. But the other thing that Georgia's playing, COVID. Some of these other programs have had 30, 40 guys that have been in and out in COVID. And Kirby even said you wonder if that hurts. Now, nobody would ever say to their guys, go out and get COVID now so you won't get into the season. But the fact of the matter is that some SEC programs have had their guys go through COVID protocol, had certain guys that have been out, and I'm no scientist, but, do they build up antibodies? Are they less prone, less likely? Regardless of your scientific stance on this, the bottom line is that COVID-19 is another factor. And, who knows, maybe, it gets to the point where, enough guys are out, you want every advantage you can get. And Greg McGarity picks up the phone and says, hey, Jacksonville, we're staying at home. We're not giving up a home game, getting on that airplane, man. We need every advantage we can get. I don't know if he'll get to that point. They love the tradition. You said I could take it anywhere I wanted, DA.
I did.
But
I regret saying that.
Let me throw in one thing here.
You can get, but I would disagree with Jeff. I can't see 7-3 as the floor. I'm kind of more on the Connor Riley 8-2 as the floor thing.
Oh my gosh! If I hear one more time, boys, that's me saying that I had Georgia at 7-3. Let's talk about this for a second, guys. Everybody would see very clearly. Can I get a second that best team Georgia's had so far in the Kirby era? That's the 2017 Georgia team. Is that a quick? Sure. I approve. I agree.
By the way, Jeff, you've got the best background that I've seen on any dog nation. It's the natural lighting is incredible. Jeff.
Very nice background. But yes, 2017 was the best team. Yes.
This couch cushion says 7-3 question mark. If you guys could see that 7-3 question mark. But everybody remembers that magical, fantasy crazy year. Everybody remembers the score of that Notre Dame game, right? 20-19.
Yeah.
Everybody remembers that South Carolina game, 24-10, when it shouldn't have been 24-10 at home. Everybody remembers that Auburn game. Now, if that team can lose on the road in the SEC, certainly, this team in an all-SEC schedule can also lose on the road in the SEC.
And find a way to go 7-3. I think we've all heard Jeff loud and clear tonight.
Let me bring it back to the original question, though, and I want a short answer from everybody. Ultimately, I guess I'm a little bit concerned that Georgia has one less quarterback. But if you make the comparison between Newman and Daniels, I had Newman pegged to be the starter, but I don't change my overall season outlook because I'm assuming now JT Daniels. I think Newman and Daniels are very different quarterbacks. My overall evaluation of the two guys pretty close. I don't really know how good either one of them was going to be. I think they both have a chance or would have had a chance to be capable. So just to kind of quickly get back to the original question, Mike, I don't change my season projection too much if it's Daniels compared to Newman, because I think there's a degree to which both those guys are still a little bit unknown.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I just think the direction of the offense shifts distinctly with JT Daniels under center. And I just feel like they're more air raid and less RPO. And I'll be honest, when they brought in and they said there'd be a new offense, I didn't know to what extent we would be talking about air raid and what extent we'd be talking about RBO. I really believe that the JT Daniels addition has really changed things. I think this has gotten Todd Monken excited and the Georgia coaches excited that now you've got a guy, you feel like you've got a trigger, you've got an NFL guy, whether these projections are way too early or not, they may be. I think you got a really good a DN90 on that makes good points be way too early for first round projections. But if Jamie Newman is who they think he is, then this offense could be dynamic and not just have to, be efficient. They're going to do that now. They're not going to turn the ball over. That's another thing about a JT Daniels. He's not going to throw the pick. He's not going to make the careless throw that maybe a freshman might make under those circumstances. But I also feel like there's a lot of upside if this receiving core can come around.
Connor, give me a last word, then I want to read a comment.
I don't think that it, as Jeff has pointed out, drastically changes Georgia's season. The word I go back to is margin of error. It's much slimmer now. The sort of safety net that Georgia has, it's one end is cut and the other is sort of just hanging on there by a thread. And he laid out the doomsday scenario there where you do have one quarterback go down and you're worried about Dwan Mathis, or you're even worried about JT Daniels, given they both have injury concerns and injury histories. And you're one bad game against an Auburn team that Brandon Adams really seems to like, away from being the apocalyptic 7-3 scenario. So again, I still think, and just like I believe Jeff Santel does, 9-1 is still probably the most likely scenario for this Georgia team this year. However, now with Newman out, you open the door more towards that 7-3 scenario and slightly shut that 10-0 door a little bit closer.
So a lot of people on Facebook are upset. They feel like we're not giving Georgia enough credit for the record expectation. Let me read one of these comments as a way of kind of summing all this up. Robert Moody says, we have too much depth at every position to be a one-loss team at the worst. Here's the only thing I'll say in response to this, and there's a chance I'm wrong because none of us have seen what's about to unfold. Here's the one thing you have to understand. For as good as Georgia's been, as good as really anybody the last few years, the one thing we have not seen them do in the last 4 or 5 years, they haven't won against SEC opponents on 5 consecutive Saturdays. They've had 5-game winning streaks, but 5 consecutive Saturdays of beating SEC opponents, they haven't done that yet in the Kirby Smart era. The schedule just doesn't usually ask you to do that. But in the first half of the season alone, they'll play SEC games 5 weeks in a row. So you may be right. Maybe this team does go 9-1. I think there's a really good chance that they do. If they do go 9-1, though, I do think it's important to acknowledge just how challenging that feat is. As I said before, for as good record-wise as Georgia's been and as good as Georgia's been overall, those week in, week out deals where you have to beat SEC teams week after week after week after week, Georgia just hasn't had to do that. On the 5th straight game, a couple of SEC teams, Georgia's not one of them, a couple of SEC teams have to play 6 straight games against SEC opponents. When you get to that 5th and 6th game, your performance measurably will be worse no matter who you're playing because of the ringer that you've been through. Now, I agree with the average fan who says, find a way to win anyway, and I totally agree with that. But you will see Georgia and all SEC teams, after 5 straight weeks of SEC-only competition, they're not going to have as much gas in the tank. That's Georgia, that's Alabama, that's LSU, that's everybody.
So since the readers and listeners all seem to think we're down on Georgia this year and where they finish, Mike Griffith, give us your official Georgia record prediction at the end of the regular season.
At the end of the regular season, I guess the over-under is 9-1. I'm going with, I'd say 9-1.
Jeff, give me your record.
I think it's 9-1, and it'll be the best record in the SEC.
I believe they will go 9-1. BA, what record do you think they will go this regular season?
Yeah, I still think you're going 9-1.
Yeah. So, look, you can both simultaneously be concerned about this Georgia offense, given what we saw last year, where I think a lot of people at the beginning of the year were very optimistic about James Coley and what he was able to do and potentially how this team was going to turn around, even without some of that wide receiver talent. And that just proved to not be the case. So I think there's rightful skepticism here. But all four of us also agree this Georgia team is still great and one of the best teams in the country. And I think based on all of us saying they're going to be 9-1, going into that SEC championship game, they're going to be playing for a spot in the college football playoff game.
If they go 9-1 also, and I guess I think they will, because I think they're still way better than Florida, and they've had great success in recent years against Auburn, a team that I do think is pretty good this year. It's the best regular season of my lifetime. 9-1 against this schedule. We'll put December aside for a moment. 9-1 against this schedule is the best regular season of my lifetime. Better than 2017.
I agree, totally agree. And everybody, that there's no asterisk next to that one, Brandon, like I think a ball coach like to say. I just think there's a different dynamic here to this season. And this is probably a topic for another show, but folks, what do you think is the bigger storyline in 2020? Is it injuries when you're worn down by the meat grinder of the SEC in depth? Or is it quarantine and losing guys and losing maybe half your line for an important game in week 6 or week 7? What do you guys think will end up ultimately being the bigger storyline in 2020?
Well, for me, I think it's kind of a combination of that, of the teams that haven't recruited well enough to have a full roster. In other words, the team that has kind of a shiny group of 11 starters, but maybe below that, some guys they're trying to hide, some guys they don't feel quite as good about. I think those teams get exposed. Yeah, exactly. I think those teams get exposed in a year like this. If you don't have second and third string depth, if you haven't had true competition for playing time during your preseason camp, when injuries come or heaven forbid a COVID thing happens and somebody, tests positive and can't play, when that stuff occurs, these teams that have been, nibbling around the margins on National Signing Day, they're going to get exposed in a big way. And that's where a team like Georgia does stand to benefit, that when things get stressful, when there's a roster attrition, and none of us want it to happen, but if it does occur, the teams that have recruited best are going to be in the best position to perform in that spot. And that is where Georgia ought to be able to thrive.
Yeah, that's where the schedule really hurts. That's where having that front-loaded schedule really hurts, BA, because if you sprinkle in a Vanderbilt or a Mississippi State or a Missouri or this downtrodden South Carolina, you sprinkle those teams in among the first 6 or 7 games and you're feeling pretty good. But right now, if you got somebody, the way the protocol works, the person infected is out 10 days, everybody in contact's out 14 days. You're talking about missing 2 games. And the way the SEC stacked this schedule on Georgia, which, listen, there's only 3 teams in the league that don't play back-to-back home games: Ole Miss, Alabama, and Florida. I don't like this Georgia schedule. I think it's unfortunate. And it's almost like somebody in the conference office said, oh, they think Georgia has an easy schedule, huh? All right, well, we'll fix that. Because you don't have a home game between October 10th and November 21st.
All right, put a pin in the schedule, because I want to come back to that before we're done. It's Cover 4 Live. It's presented by Georgia Farm Bureau, because I think there's something I think that needs to be fully examined about the Georgia schedule and the rest of the SEC. So we'll do that before we're done. Cover 4 Live, presented by Georgia Farm Bureau. Mike Griffith, Jeff Sintel, Connor Riley. My name is Brandon Adams. It's good to have you with us. Let me shift gears, though, to some Georgia players here for a moment. Mike, before you came on the air with us, you had a chance to be a part of some Georgia press coverage. Connor Riley, you may have been a part of that today, too, with Ben Cleveland made available to the media, James Cook being made available. And not to be too inside the weeds here for a moment, but there's typically something to who Georgia lets talk to reporters. A lot of times we assume that's a guy who's been practicing well, a guy that Georgia in preseason situation maybe has big expectations for. I take really something about James Cook being that guy today, based on what Georgia running backs coach Del McGee would have said yesterday, some of the video stuff that Georgia's released that seemed to kind of feature James Cook, to the extent that maybe you're reading that maybe a little bit too much. If you told me the one guy this season right now that I'm most intrigued to see, James Cook might be my name, because I'm starting to grow in the possibility that Cook is ready to be more than just an interesting athlete that Georgia can use in creative ways. He may be a pretty dadgum good tailback too. Tough, hard yards between the tackles this year, just based on some of the pictures I've seen, physical condition he looks to be in. I would say that for me, the player I'm most intrigued to see to start this season is James Cook. Connor, who would your answer be?
JT Daniels. I get that it's the easy because he's the quarterback, but you and I have talked about James Cook. You slept on James Cook for a long time, and now I would say you join the woke James Cook truthers out there. I just think with Jamie Newman no longer here, I expect we'll see some Dwan Mathis, or especially in that Arkansas game, but I am expecting Daniels at least to start to be the guy, and I'm just interested to see what he looks like in Todd Monken's offense. An offense I think he probably fits traditionally what Monken has looked for and asked for from his quarterbacks a little bit better than what Newman has. And that's going to be the big thing, in my opinion, that hangs over this season is, does JT Daniels or does Georgia get a good enough quarterback play to make them forget about Jamie Newman and also Justin Fields? But that's a whole different scenario there.
Jeff, who would your answer be?
Brandon, I'm going to say this very succinctly. And it's the same answer I had before the 2018 season. That is Zeus. It's not Zamir White. It's Zeus. You put your ear to the ground, you start hearing things, waking up the echoes of that five-star tailback, the number one tailback in the country, one of the best 10 tailbacks of the last 20 years that have been scouted by folks like me to do this for a living. I want to see Zeus.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I certainly think that's a guy that even non-Georgia fans now have kind of been aware of. He's been here for a while, and the thought that he could be as good as he once hinted at being during his high school career, that's certainly an interesting name there. By the way, interesting to think that two running backs have been mentioned in this conversation thus far. Mike Griffith, who would your answer be?
I'm going to go with Trey Hill. No, I'm just kidding. I'm going to switch it up, and I'm going to go on defense. I'm going with, and I like your answer. James Cook, obviously. I want to see if he can be that video game guy that runs up all the numbers. He's the guy that you're going to – do they still put the star under the guy like that you want to be? Like, I would want to be James Cook in this offense.
Yeah.
JT Daniels, obviously, I think, we talk about the trigger. He's your ceiling. You need JT Daniels to be a first-round pick for Georgia to win a championship. But I flip it over on the other side. I feel good about Lecount. I feel good. But Nakobe Dean, can he be that X factor? Can he be that playmaker? He was the highest rated freshman in pass coverage among the linebackers in the country. He played half a year on a high ankle sprain. He's got a lot of speed. He's got a lot of playmaking. You watch the film, you turn the film on in this guy, you see the angles that he takes. You don't see many guys that can get to the ball like Nakobe Dean. You know about the instincts. To me, I think he needs to be that guy. I like Monty a lot. Don't get me wrong. He wears the number 32. Got a thing for that number 32. But the way he fills the gaps. But there's nothing dynamic about Monty Rice as much as there is just blue collar and assignment football. They need a dynamic playmaker at the line in the linebacking core, and I think Nakobe Dean can be that guy.
Yeah, I definitely think that Dean has a higher ceiling than Rice does, although Rice himself is turning into a pretty good prospect. But I agree with you that Dean has the overall higher ceiling for this year. However, and Jeff and Connor, I'll bring you in on this since Mike brings it up. It seems like we always mention Dean together with Nolan Smith and Trayvon Walker because they were the three kind of five-star signees in that front seven from the same class. And it seems like if you catch me on a different day, I might argue for one in comparison to the other two. I don't know that I've maintained a strong level of consistency in ranking them in terms of who's truly set to have the breakout season this year. Jeff, you covered all three of these guys in recruiting. Mike mentions Nakobe Dean. It's not an incorrect answer. Dean could be amazing this year. But if I give you Trayvon, if I give you Nolan, if I give you Nakobe, those 3 5-star signees who've all kind of shown you glimpses of why they were so highly rated. If you got to name one from that 3, who's the one you name?
Good question, Brandon. I'm going to think about if this young man plays and he squeezes and oozes every ounce of his potential out of his body this year, plays at their absolute best. I think that's Trayvon Walker. I think Trayvon Walker, should he play very good the next 2 years, will be a top 10 pick. I think Nolan Smith is right there too, though. Nolan Smith is a different kind of athlete. Everybody talks about the next Isaiah Simmons. I'm going to hold to my guns here about something I said when Nolan Smith was coming out. He has the ability to be the type of player where folks would kind of redefine that rush position guy, where people would say Georgia's looking for the next Nolan Smith, like they were looking for the next Roquan Smith. I think it's those two names. Nothing against Nakobe Dean, who is basically a defensive coordinator between his ears, and he's a wide receiver with his legs and everything else like that, at least speed-wise and burst and ability. I think the answer there to me is for Trayvon, just simply because you don't have 6'5", 280 that move quite like he does. They can play on the outside, can play on the inside, can come around across the stunt, and somehow find a way to beat that Auburn program that Brandon Adams probably got a Auburn light switch on his door as he goes through the hall or whatever.
Stop it. Connor, how about you? When you compare the three, and we group them together a lot, is there one that stands out above the rest? And if I made you make one stand out, who would you select?
I have to pick Trayvon Walker because we mentioned ceiling so much tonight. His ceiling is the roof. His ceiling is so much higher than I think anybody else on this Georgia team. And if he gets there, now he maybe has a little bit farther to go, I think, than Nakobe Dean and Nolan Smith do to reach their respective ceilings this season. But if he gets there, he's like a Jonathan Allen type impact player on that defensive line for this Georgia team, and a guy who can wreck both the run game and the pass game on every single down from a different position. There just aren't a whole lot of guys out there like that, whereas we've seen really good and capable pass rushers come through. We've seen dynamic linebackers, maybe, from the pass rushing standpoint, not at Georgia, but at other programs. But if Georgia's able to do that with Trayvon Walker and turn him into a top 5 player in all of college football, that's going to open so many doors, not just for him, but for the rest of this Georgia defense.
I think that's probably true. And listen, I love Nakobe Dean. I'd love for Dean to be what great inside linebacker play Georgia has been, and we all know who's coming to mind when you think about that. I'd love for that to be true. But my gosh, not only is Trayvon Walker's, ceiling so high, if he achieved it, it would just be such a problem for the rest of the SEC. A defensive lineman who can, be on the edge or kind of be, in the interior from time to time. That's just such a problem. I think that not only do I think Walker may be it, I would maybe select Walker as being that guy. The problem for Nolan, and this is, a rich person's problem, but the problem for Nolan is there are a lot of really good outside linebackers at Georgia. He's going to share some time with Jermaine Johnson, who's very good in his own right. Azeez Ojulari, who's very good in his own right. Nolan's going to share some time there. Trayvon's going to share a little bit of time too. But I just think there's a chance that by the end of the season, the entirety of the SEC, fans who follow this league closely, they may all view Trayvon Walker as Georgia's best player, regardless of position. I think this is the kind of year where he just seems very likely he takes that big stride forward, and he's just the best player on this team, the kind of player that casual fan, sitting in a sports bar somewhere in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, knows about that guy because of how impactful that he is. So to kind of take Mike's thing and twist it a little bit, if you give me those 3 5-star guys, Mike, I believe I take Trayvon there as well.
Yeah, I can understand that. I'm just not as excited by defensive line plays, seeing those linebackers in space. When's the last time you saw a Georgia guy just take somebody's head off and just strike fear into somebody in the open field? And, I just feel like Nakobe can have that effect. Jeff mentioned the wide receiver skills at linebacker. I'm thinking pick sixes, but in terms of brute efficiency, I'm a big fan of Trayvon Walker's talents, of athleticism, a 285-pound guy running down on kicks, playing through 2 wrist injuries, not just one, the speed, the power. Got a lot of good things to say about Trayvon Walker. I wouldn't doubt that call at all. I guess I'm just being selfish and wanting to see that great linebacker play. It seems like the best defenses I've covered, whether it was a Michigan State Rose Bowl team or the 98 Vols with Al Wilson, there's been that linebacker. There's been that dude that everybody fears that makes that play. And I just haven't seen that out of Georgia the last couple of years, not since Roquan Smith.
I will say, to sort of Mike's original point in answering the question that he was, Nakobe Dean has the best chance, I think, of those 3 of having the biggest impact this season, in part because he has the easiest, I think, path to playing time and seeing it on a consistent level, whereas Georgia, I do think, is going to have to get a little bit more creative with finding ways to get Trayvon Walker and Nolan Smith on the field on a down-to-down basis.
Jeff, I know you want to jump in, but let me just respond to Connor real quick. You may be right, but Nakobe Dean has made that look easier than it really was.
Oh, yeah.
To get on the field as much as he did as a freshman, he leapt over some pretty good players. There's some really talented players that Nakobe Dean skipped the line on to play a bunch last year. So it may not be that he has a huge threat to take playing time from him right now, but that's because he's vanquished some pretty impressive foes just to get to the point where he is right now in only 1 year on campus.
Yeah.
Jeff, what do you want to say?
Yeah, case can be made. Nakobe's freshman year was better than Roquan's freshman year.
I think it
But
was.
you know what? Here's what I'll say, and this is a good example where recruiting trail can bleed to on-field team discussion and kind of merge together right here. And this is what I think here. And we're just a bunch of buddies hanging out on the back deck on a Thursday night. I think if Georgia can get two guys with 10 sacks, and it could be Aziz, it could be Jermaine, it could be Trayvon, some combination of two guys with 10 sacks, show pass rush, show getting to the quarterback and getting havoc from that front seven, I think the chances of Georgia landing Corey Foreman and Mason Smith go up exponentially because Georgia needs to show these guys from Louisiana, Houma, Louisiana, California, Corona, California, that they can get to the passer, and they could have more than 30 hurries from Devontae Wyatt and more than 38 hurries from Azeez Ojulari, that they can get the quarterback on the ground. I think that's the missing puzzle and a lot of beautiful things to come for Georgia football.
So I probably should have already known this. Is Corey Foreman's hometown really Corona?
Yes. Yeah, Corona, California. Yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
How about that?
So this is a case of Corona you want to get, Brandon. You want to get the Corona. You want to get this case of Corona.
There you go. That's pretty good stuff all the way around. Let me read this real quick from Andy Ray before we change topics, and I do want to do one more topic before we're done. Andy Ray on Facebook says, you talk about all the elite athletes we just mentioned, but Andy says Monty Rice needs to stay healthy. That's crucial for our overall defensive efficiency. And Mike, just to wrap this up, I do kind of agree with Andy on that. You're right, Mike, that Nakobe Dean has a spectacular potential to him. We're 3 years removed this week, by the way, from Georgia Notre Dame in 2017. That was the week when I realized that Roquan Smith was going to be as special as he turned out to be. Nakobe Dean could be levitating on a field like that this fall. He has a higher ceiling. But I do think that Andy's right here in the comment section that for this team this year, given what happens when he's not on the field, Monty Rice may still be a more important player for this team, even as dynamic as a guy like Nakobe and the other two guys, Trayvon and Nolan we just mentioned. Monty Rice is less spectacular, but he may still be more important.
Yeah, he's very important. He's a senior. He's in the middle of the huddle. Again, he's the blue-collar guy that, stuffs that run. He takes great pride. Georgia didn't give up a rushing touchdown until the 10th game of the season. And I still remember talking to Monty after the Auburn game, and he was really upset. Here they just pulled out this big win, and Monty was upset that Bo Nix was able to slide into the end zone. I mean, that was a real source of pride. Monty's a guy that everybody listens to. I'm not downplaying Monty Rice. I just think his role is a lot more blue collar, where I think you need a playmaker that can get that interception in space and make those plays in space on defense. And like I said, I was kind of disappointed. I didn't see as much of that last year as maybe I'd hoped for in the back seven. And I think Nakobe Dean is the guy.
Connor, very quick final answer on this because I really do want to change topics here. There are not a lot of inside linebackers taken in the first rounds. I don't know that Monty's a first-round guy, but I could see him going in the second round of the NFL draft. Could you see Monty being drafted that high?
I think so. I think with him, it's going to come down to how well he tests at the combine or what he is able to do at a theoretical combine, how fast he's able to run, how good he's athletically able to test, because I think we've seen it there from the on-field play that he is very good and adept in that in between the sidelines. It's just how well can you cover, how well can you run. That'll sort of determine how high I think he ends up going in this year's draft.
Cover 4 Live presented by Georgia Farm Bureau. That's Connor Riley. I've got Jeff Sintel, Mike Griffith here as well. My name's Brandon Adams. Our fourth topic today, I'm going to make this kind of short, but I am curious what y'all think about this. There are 4 playoff spots. There are 3 Power 5 leagues playing. So someone stands to have a multiple playoff team this year, either the SEC, the ACC, the Big 12. I would suggest the SEC is in the best position to do that because they've done that as recently as 2017. I also said on Dog Nation Daily this week that I really only view 4 true playoff teams outside the SEC. For me, it's Clemson, obviously, Notre Dame, kind of. I've picked Texas to make the playoff, and I think obviously Oklahoma, you have to conclude them because they've been the last 3 years. Beyond that, you're getting to like UNC and Iowa State, maybe Oklahoma State. I mean, you're really reaching to find non-SEC playoff teams, beyond the 4 that I just mentioned. So we get back to the idea of there could be 2 SEC teams make the college football playoff. And there's a specific reason I'm asking this, but let me just kind of start generally here. Do you think two SEC teams make the playoff? And if you do, which two do you think? Jeff, I'll start with you.
Good question. It'll have to be one that comes outside of the championship game, of course. I'm going to say, yeah, two teams do make the two teams out of the SEC do make it. You might have a case where you have a couple of 8-2s, and the one that won the head-to-head out of one region makes it in. So you have Brendan, here's the other thing. I think we've hinted at this earlier. What happens if, let me say, for instance, Texas A&M walks on water this year, but then Kellen Mond misses 2 games because of contact tracing or COVID or something like that, and those are the only two games that Texas A&M loses. They don't qualify out of the West. Alabama does, but then they come back. That's a scenario I can kind of see. To me, that although that sounds like science fiction a little bit, something out of George Lucas, I can't see 2 ACC teams getting in there. I can't see 2 ACC teams getting in there, and the way the current structure is set up, and that you're going to leave a Big 12 team to get in there as well. So I can very likely, if you're getting 4, I would say half that might have to come from the SEC.
Mike, George Lucas couldn't write something that good, so you don't have to worry about that.
Oh, careful, Connor. Careful.
Hey,
some of our childhoods are still a little fragile. Mike, do you think the SEC gets 2, and which 2 do you think it is?
I think they should, but I don't think they will.
You don't think they'll get 2?
Yeah, I'd bet against.
Are you serious?
Politics, man. Politics, guys. I mean, that committee, this same committee left Georgia out instead of Oklahoma 2 years ago. Same people are on it. Same Georgia Tech AD. You got a couple other knuckleheads on it. I just think it's so political. And it's going to be some undefeated AAC team. They're going to go, and this is the year when a Cincinnati team runs the table, and they're going to be that team that crashes the party. And you get 1 from the SEC and 1 from the ACC and 1 from the Big 12. And maybe BYU goes undefeated or some AAC team. And we go, see, the system works after all.
So I don't think there's any chance they put a non-Power 5 team in the playoff. I feel pretty comfortable in saying that. I mean, could you worry about if there's an argument to be made for a Notre Dame, or if Texas was the Big 12 runner-up? Obviously, they've got big fan bases. That's a tough argument. But I don't see a non-Power 5 team making it.
But you did say earlier that you could see a 2 or a 3-loss team because of the SEC schedule and it being a 10-game schedule, and so that's kind of what lends credence to that.
That's fair, Connor. How about you? 2 SEC teams make it, and if so, which 2?
Well, Jeff seems to think Georgia's going to 7-3, so I'll cross them off. I do think if we're going to see 2 teams from a single conference, you probably have to say the SEC. I don't know. As much as I do think Texas gets in, if it's 9, let's say there's 9-1 Oklahoma, 9-1 Texas, 9-1 Notre Dame, and 10-0 Clemson. That's the scenario I think where you see maybe the SEC doesn't get 2 teams in. But if I'm making my prediction today, give me Clemson as the number 1 overall seed, Georgia as the number 2 seed, Texas as the number 3 seed, and Alabama as the number 4 seed.
So it sounds like you disagree with me on something, and I agree with something that Jeff said a moment ago. I do think there are 2 SEC teams make the college football playoff. I don't think there's any way it's the same 2 teams to play in the SEC championship. I think there's still a huge human element here. I think it's hard for anybody in that committee room to want to put somebody in the playoff coming off of a loss. So for me, you have to start thinking about a non-division winner as the second SEC team coming in here, which puts a Texas A&M in play. I think A&M's got a really strong record. I think it puts y'all laugh at me, but I think it puts an Auburn in play at least a little bit. I think that team's pretty dangerous. And the third team here is, and I mentioned this week on Dog Nation Daily, as much as it pains me to admit, Florida, after losing to Georgia the last couple of years, has actually held it together pretty good. They played well against lesser competition in SEC play after the cocktail party a year ago. Hold on, let me finish this point, Connor. I'll let you say what you want to say.
I'll give you satisfaction.
Thank you. What if Georgia, to win a national championship, just hear me out on this for a moment, had to beat Alabama in the regular season, Florida in the regular season, had to beat Alabama again in the SEC championship, and had to turn around and eventually beat Florida for a second time in the college football playoff? What if Georgia won the national championship, playing Alabama twice, beating Florida twice? I don't think it would be unheard of for that second SEC team as much as it pains me to admit, to maybe be a team like Florida, and Georgia would then have to beat them twice.
You know, Brandon, this may be your dream of all dreams for this season, but if Georgia has to beat Alabama twice, Florida twice, and Clemson once to win the national title, oh Nelly, in honor of the late great Keith Jackson, that is a high degree of difficulty right there, man.
And I still think that Florida is a really good matchup for Georgia. So if you had to play Florida again in the playoff, that's a lot better than maybe who you could be playing in certain situations. But it would just add to the weirdness of the season, and maybe make a weird season a little bit more enjoyable, to think that you'd have this rich history added to this rivalry of playing for a second time. I don't think it's unheard of. I think if there is a second SEC team, it's likely to be a division runner-up more so than the conference runner-up. Connor, what did you want to say?
So the reason I have Alabama getting in and Georgia getting in is because I believe Georgia will go 9-1 in the regular season, as we have all agreed upon. And while I don't know if anyone else feels this way, I think Alabama is going to go 10-0 in the regular season, and then they will lose in the rematch to Georgia in the SEC championship game. And that is how you get the two teams playing the SEC championship game in the college football playoff.
Mike, what would be a bigger story? Georgia playing both Alabama and Florida twice in the same year, or having to play Alabama 3 times in the same year?
I can't imagine. Can't imagine either scenario. Too far-fetched. Don't think Florida's that good. Can't imagine Alabama getting in. After the first time Alabama got in as a non, they weren't even a participant. They lost by 10 points to their rivals. They shouldn't have even been in the 2017.
But that is who makes the playoff, though. It's the team that gets around that.
Not in 2018, it wasn't. That team should have been Georgia, and they got overlooked because the guys that are on the committee now redefined, and they started going to some predisposed rule we didn't even know existed about conference champion.
But I'm not talking about what should be. I would agree with you that Georgia was one of the 4 best teams in 2018, but that's not what the committee does. The committee puts Ohio State in 2016 when they weren't a division winner. They put Alabama in. So what I'm saying is not what should happen, but that's just probably the kind of thing that if it's a second SEC team, history does sort of show you that it's the non-division winner who gets the nod there.
I'm going with the politics, guys. I'm sticking to my guns. I think they're going to try and make a statement that the little guy can get in. There won't be any cross-conference games that can knock that theory out of the water. You can say, well, how can you say that? We don't even know how good the AAC is. If a team like Cincinnati runs the table or BYU runs the table, I think they're going to make a strong case, especially if they're comparing them to a 2-loss SEC team.
So last point on this, John William Adams brings this up on Facebook, and I think it's a good one. If Georgia were to beat Florida twice in the same year, what do you do to the gator header up there at that point in time? It's almost like you got to do like a force multiplier. You got to give like a 1.5, multiplier on that, just to acknowledge that it's not just a growing number of days. We're also adding some extra games there along that front. John William Adams brings a really good point on that. And by the way, speaking of our comments, let's shift gears in the time we have left here on Cover 4 Live, presented by Georgia Farm Bureau. Don't forget, check them out online at gfbinsurance.com. Your home, your auto, your life, they can save you money on that. They live in the community that you live in. They work in the community that you work in, supporting the people that live around you. Georgia Farm Bureau is always the home team. All right, cover more. Now, we've done the Cover 4. We've had our say. Time for the Cover More, your chance to have your say. Try to do this in about 3 minutes or so and get on out the door after that. Amos Williams says he agrees with Mike Griffith, so whatever Mike said, Amos agrees with that. Andy Ray says he could see Georgia and Auburn making the college football playoff. And listen, one way or another, that 4th team that makes the playoff is going to be a little bit of a weird team, right? I mean, there's going to be a little bit of a weird story there. And if you're in Auburn, you're starting the year, even, preseason 11 when the full top 25 was considered. I mean, Auburn's not out of the playoff discussion, nor is Texas A&M. I would say nor even with all the attrition, nor is LSU, and nor is Florida as well. I mean, Florida has, as much as it pains me to admit, finished the top 10 the last 2 years.
Brandon, we have been talking about that all Big 12 schedule that Texas and Oklahoma are going to have to play.
Yeah, not quite the same thing as the all SEC, although the Big 12 teams are getting a little cupcake tasting in this weekend, though, at least the ones that are able to play.
A fun little update, Brandon. Right now, UAB just scored on Miami. I know that's one of your favorite on the download G coaches, and Bill Clark at UAB. And remember right after the Sugar Bowl when everybody was talking about who could be the transfer portal quarterback for Georgia, De'Ara King out of Houston was on a lot of folks' mind, especially on those forum message boards. He's playing right now for Miami, so folks could get a glimpse or a glimmer of what could have been or what people were thinking might have happened at quarterback for Georgia.
Yeah, I think that King's a pretty interesting player to watch tonight, just to see, how interesting he could be once the ACC schedule begins. Lloyd Dog says, what if Notre Dame runs the table? Does Clemson get the 4th spot? Is Clemson more vulnerable in the ACC this year than they were a year ago, Connor?
I think with Notre Dame in there, yes, and the fact that North Carolina, one, avoids them in the regular season, gives them potentially a little bit better of a schedule to get to that ACC title game at the end of the year. I think it's a trickier division this year, but that's largely due to the fact that the ACC was god-awful last year, and it's hard to imagine it getting worse this season, especially when you add in Notre Dame might not be a great team. They might not recruit at the highest level, but they are at the very worst a good, solid college football team.
Yeah, I think that I think there's a chance that North Carolina may be the second best team in the ACC. So Clemson gets a little bit of a break by not playing the regular season.
They got to beat They got to beat Wake Forest this year. Don't forget, Jamie Newman beat North Carolina last year.
Yeah, there you go. No doubt. Thomas Van Zandt, and I always mispronounce his last name, and I apologize for that. He's checking on YouTube. Good to see him there. Let's do one or two more comments and get ready to get off the air here in just a little bit. Jason Brian Lee says, let's hope we beat Auburn. Mike, the funny thing about that Auburn game, looming week 2, you talk about the top-loaded, front-loaded nature of the Georgia schedule. Auburn in week 2 is certainly an interesting date for that game to be played. Home opener, by the way.
Yeah, it's at home, so I feel good about it. And obviously Auburn's got some things they got to take care of. Bigger concern is week 3 and 4, Tennessee and Alabama.
You concerned about Tennessee for Georgia?
Yeah, I think they're coming after the quarterback. I think they got a payback after what Eric did to their quarterback late in that game. You're going to have a quarterback that's susceptible. Jeremy's going to try and get your quarterback, and he's going to try and hit him. And to me, that's the game that I look at as a danger game. Forget the scoreboard. I think Tennessee's going to try and settle a score physically.
Well, there you go.
They might not have enough guys to do that, though, given the issues they're having with COVID right now. So
they're going to put. Connor, they're going to put Cade Mays in a different numbered jersey. He's not going to be eligible. You're not going to know that's him out there. He's going to be like Cooper Mays looks huge.
It's going to be like when Dusty Rhodes put the Midnight Rider mask on. He's going to be out there in a mask. I can see that. Honestly, if Tennessee wanted to earn my respect, put Cade Mays in a mask, put him in a hood, circa like 1980s professional wrestling, and pretend like he's the Midnight Rider. It would be hard for Tennessee to earn my respect, but that might get a little respect for me.
I don't think Kirby Smart's going to have any problem finding his golf balls around against Tennessee this year. I will say that inside Sanford Stadium.
That's interesting. Last one, we'll get ready to go. Clinton Wooden says, if the SEC championship game is won in overtime, I could see both teams getting in. And you may be right. It could set up a very interesting scenario. Listen, I'm excited about the 10-game schedule. I'm excited about Georgia. I think the playoff debate this year is going to be fascinating. I just think it's going to be a lot of fun. I really do. Anybody got a final thought before we get ready to go here?
Do we drop this Kirby
football
Smart
season's
thing
here.
out?
You got NFL on tonight. Fantasy teams are booming. College football. It's a great thing.
Connor, do you want to promote your piece, Connor? I just saw what Connor's working on. It's awful good.
Yeah, Jeremy Pruitt took a shot at Kirby Smart's golf game today. Smart,
no way.
Smart's ball is always the one in the woods. It's always Smart. And then Kirby Smart about 20 minutes ago tweeted out, for the record, I don't play golf with anyone that's a 25-plus handicap.
There is no way Jeremy Pruitt's good at golf. Kirby, I don't think is all that bad. There's no way Pruitt's good at golf. No, there's not a chance.
I know Georgia's a better golf school than Tennessee is for a fact. So
yeah, no doubt about that. So that's pretty good stuff right there. That's the story I want to read. Good stuff. And a good way to close that tonight. Go ahead,
that's
Jeff.
that golf ball comment I just said, Brendan. I said, I'm pretty sure Kirby Smart will be able to find his golf ball in Sanford Stadium. And you gave me that, yeah, that sounds pretty good right there, and then moved along.
I had no idea what you were talking about at the first, but now I do. And now I'm very entertained by that. Looking forward to read that story. And, frankly, good for these two coaches for zinging each other back and forth.
I want a Peyton Manning, Tom Brady style match between Pruitt and Kirby Smart with Tiger Woods and Peyton Manning. And I want Manning playing with Kirby Smart because I know Manning is better friends with Kirby.
Yeah, he likes him better. I also think that if you want an idea of what Pruitt's golf game's probably like, go back and watch Tom Brady from that match. That's about what I expect Jeremy Pruitt to be. on the golf course. All right, we're going to get ready to go. Thanks for being here. Cover 4 Live, presented by Georgia Farm Bureau. Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m., Dog Nation Daily. You better believe I'm going to be grilling Jeff Sintel about 5-star defensive lineman Mason Smith. Jeff's going to go into the microscope on that one tomorrow. Looking forward to that, the interrogator's chair. Mike Griffith got you some good stuff coming up at dognation.com as well. I'm imagining he'll see you on video tomorrow night. Connor Riley, also all kinds of stuff. By the way, tomorrow, also a big day around Dog Nation. The great matchup, main event, anywhere in the country. 5-star 2022 quarterback, Gunnar Stockton. 5-star 2021 and UGA commit, Brock Vandegrift. Pretty fun matchup. Jeff, it's so late. I've really got 1,000 things to do, but give me like a 2-second thumbnail on Stockton versus Vandegrift tomorrow night.
So last year in the playoffs, the Prince Avenue Christian lost to Eagles Landing Christian and Justin Robinson, 62-57. I think Brock Vandegrift had 5 touchdowns and 525 yards. He went on to, Eagles Landing went on to win their 5th consecutive state title. I think this game's going to look a lot like that. It might be something like 48-45. Maybe the defensive coordinators won't lose all their air, but it will be hard keeping the points off the scoreboard.
Good stuff. Hey, we got to go. Thanks for being here. Cover 4 Live. Big thanks to Georgia Farm Bureau for making it all possible. Y'all have a great night. See you tomorrow morning, all throughout the day at dognation.com as well.